Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you very much for joining us today in this ongoing webinar series that we are hosting here at US Analytics. Today, we are very lucky to have someone here to talk to us about planning and budgeting cloud services from the Oracle world. We have Scott Dennis, who's probably one of the best demoers on the planet, showing us the exciting tool that they've had out here for a couple of years. So if you go to the next slide, we'll talk through our agenda. I'm hearing an echo. Are you guys hearing me okay?
Yeah, I'm hearing that echo, Craig.
Okay, I'm going to turn it down a little bit to see if that helps. If it doesn't help, let me know, and I can flip to a headset if I need to. So if you go to the agenda, first we'll do introductions of both US Analytics and the Oracle platform. Then we'll get into what world-class planning really looks like and how Hyperion and Oracle pretty much owns that part of the market. We'll talk a little bit about PVCS, and is that for you, and where does it fit in the world of our different clients. And then we'll let Scott talk us through a demo of the platform, and then we'll talk into what we need to do next to get started. As always on our webinars, you guys know this, if you have questions as we go through, please go ahead and type up those questions in the WebEx box and send that over to the host and the panelists so that we can see those questions. We will hold those until the end so that we can get through the demo. I'm thinking on the other side of the demo there'll be about 5 million questions, so at that point in time we'll queue them up and then let Scott pick them off after that. So US Analytics, we've been around now for over 15 years. We've been solely focused on enterprise performance management and business intelligence, and what that means is taking data out of source systems and from different systems and helping our clients automate their key management processes so they can measure how the organization is doing. And because we're just focused on Oracle and we just do enterprise performance management and business intelligence, we're able to be an end-to-end company for our clients. So we help them with everything from roadmap assessment, best practice approaches for new major initiatives or specific processes. We also help with implementations and upgrades. We help with the actual implementation of the application itself. We help with managed services and training as well. So because we're focused down in that one little slot, we're able to be end-to-end with pretty much all of our clients' needs. Next. As most of you guys know, planning and forecasting and budgeting and reporting fits into the enterprise performance management world. We have a very, very deep practice of people in that world as well that's totally focused on the EPM suite that you're going to see today. Those guys help us with the roadmaps and the implementations and the ongoing support for our clients. Lots of certifications within our organization, and the average tenure for the consultants at US Analytics is well over 10 years. So you're not going to see newbies show up on your client side. You're going to see seasoned professionals showing up with ideas on how to best approach the processes that you guys are wanting to automate. Next. This is the easiest slide of the day. So everyone knows Hyperion Planning and knows what it's capable of doing and where it is in the market today. So they've been around since the 2002 timeframe, 4,200 organizations worldwide. They are definitely the favorite of the finance organization when it comes to planning because it's so easy to use and so powerful. I mean, it's built, of course, on the S-based application or platform that has been around for an extremely long time. Also, Hyperion has the largest R&D than any other firm in the industry today, and that includes any of the hosting firms that are out there. So you're talking to someone that is the leader and wants to continue to be the leader moving forward. If you go down to the lower left-hand side, you can see that whenever Hyperion Planning is implemented, lots and lots of time saved in the annual plan, many, many fewer iterations, many fewer FTEs, and there's something that we call the 80-20 rule that happens where today, if you're using 80% of your time and you're in Excel hell and you're doing data validation and you're managing the process and all these Excel templates, when you move into the Hyperion Planning world, it completely flips. So only 20% of your time after that, on average, is used spending your time on validating the data and managing the process, and now you get to spend the rest of your time going through the iterations and having more iterations that are actually more valuable to the organization. Next. So we've got the leader in the world from the planning standpoint. The next thing to talk about is just the cloud in general. So Oracle is also extremely deep and a leader in the cloud world also. So they've got 20,000 companies worldwide that are using the platform today with 62,000 people, as you can see there, on a daily basis. They have data centers around the globe, so if you have a need to log on, you can immediately access your data from a data center that's nearby. And 31 million transactions processed daily, so as you can see, very deep, very experienced. Oracle is in the cloud world, even though you don't hear a lot about that, from those guys. They're very good at it. And then if you go to the next slide, if you combine the best planning software in the market with the cloud leader, go ahead and go to the next slide. Yes, I'm talking too fast. There we go. So with the cloud leader, then you obviously have the ability to execute the best, world-class planning in the cloud without any problems at all. Hyperion switched over to PBCS about 18 months ago. Clients have immediately begun moving over to the platform and are using it actively. You see over 400 clients on it today, 37,000 users and growing. And with the 19 different data centers around the globe, they're able to handle any of the increase in load that you're seeing out there today. So next. Is PBCS right for you? So we talked earlier about where would we want to go to see if PBCS could be implemented at a client. Here what you're seeing is if you have planning, budgeting, or forecasting that can occur across any of the departments in the organization, PBCS is definitely a fit. So sales, very, very common to see any types of volume times rates and even the different incentive plans that could be out there today. Of course, finance with the overall planning of either the finance organization or the overall operations, HR and IT as well. So PBCS can be a fit into any of those places where you have the need to do planning and budgeting and forecasting on an ongoing basis. It definitely reduces, as you can see here, the upfront capital requirements, because you don't have to go by and implement multiple different platforms, multiple different environments. You have the ability to use what Oracle has ready for you out there. Faster implementation times because they have some pre-built items that you could go use, as well as it's just easier to get it up and running on PVCS. They have a monthly subscription, as you can see, and of course the normal abilities and capabilities that are over in planning are also available over in PBCS, and that we know for sure is going to continue in the future. So when future releases are occurring, you're going to see immediately PVCS is going to be the one that has the releases with the new features and functionality in it available immediately. Next. So next, PVCS Overview. So I'm going to let Uncle Scott give us a little bit of background on PVCS and what he's going to put in context, what he's going to show you here during the demo. So Scott?
Hey, fantastic. Thank you, Craig. Yeah, so what we'll do over the next few minutes is really kind of walk through the Planning and Budgeting Cloud Services, PBCS, in context of really the end-user experience and what really it's like from a day in the life of interaction, work perspective with PBCS. But first, let's talk a little bit about just what PBCS is, right? It is designed to be a subscription-based, cloud-delivered, software as a service, enterprise planning application, right? So it minimizes capital and infrastructure investments, minimizes IT's involvement in application ownership and administration, very much focused on pushing ownership of the application and management of the application out to the line of business. So within the planning application are a myriad of features and capabilities designed to optimize not only the financial planning, but really operational planning processes of your business. To that point, there is embedded workflow and approvals, user task management to guide a user through a sequence of tasks or steps that they're responsible for to complete their portion of the plan or forecast process. Embedded within the application is some full support for driver-based operational planning. So to Craig's example of sales and units and margin type planning to come up with revenue and cost type assumptions. There is seamless Microsoft Office integration, so we can deliver either via a mobile device, via a web browser, or via Excel on the front end as different mechanisms for consuming the planning cloud service application. Right? There is embedded reporting and analytics as part of the application, so no need to spin up separate reporting applications or separate reporting tools. All of that can linearly happen in line as part of the plan and forecast process. Right? And finally, very robust data integration. So it's not just a matter of formatted file imports and exports. Right? You can do direct data integration through the cloud service to bring in actuals on a periodic basis. Use those as the basis for a forward-looking rolling forecast. But really all the things that you need to do to support robust enterprise planning and forecasting delivered on a simple, easy-to-use software as a service subscription model. Okay? So with that background, I think we're going to transition over and take kind of a quick look at the planning and budgeting cloud services from the demonstration point. So from this point forward, we are live in the Oracle Planning and Budgeting Cloud service. Notice the simplified, streamlined interface that makes it very, very easy for users with different needs and different responsibilities to access the portions of the plan or functions that are responsible for them. So we mentioned the idea of embedded reporting and analytics. You notice that there is a full capability of providing inline dashboarding within the PBCS environment. So if I have certain key metrics, key indicators that I want to deliver out to various different users and consumers, be they key performance indicators such as you're seeing here, which are more kind of financial executive type views of information, so kind of an executive dashboarding view, looking at key financial metrics, key ratios, key components, and things like that. Or perhaps if you wanted to, you could push out a much more detailed operational sort of a dashboard, looking at field performance by region, by sales reps, by whatever it may happen to be. So embedded graphical reporting and dashboarding simply inline in part of the plan and forecast process delivered via PVCS. Now, we had also talked about previously this concept of task management, right? So tasks are just exactly that, right? A task list is a list of tasks, steps, or activities an end user is responsible for to kind of walk through their portion or submission of the plan process. Think of this as the forecasting guideline, right? So in this particular case, what I'm doing as an end user is walking through the 10 or 11 steps that I have to complete my cost center plan and submit it up for approval within the planning cloud service. You notice that there are due dates associated within those, so I can take a look at any activities that are done across the entire focus. I can scope those down to just specific activities perhaps that are due or responsible for on an overdue basis or due today. All right, so this gives me kind of a nice guided workflow to walk my user through, almost like the budgeting wizard, right? And then give me monitoring from an overall plan perspective on where people are on a percent completion as they walk through the plan process. You notice perhaps the very first thing I want to do within the plan process is simply communicate guidelines or standards out to my end users in the field, so I can communicate instructions or standards, any type of information that's important for my users to know out in the field. I can communicate that information linearly, seamlessly, right in line in the plan process. This isn't collecting numbers. It's all about collaborating on the standards and the assumptions that need to be used throughout the enterprise. If we move forward, you'll see where we can get into kind of our first example of field data entry or field data capture within the planning and budgeting cloud services environment. So what you're seeing here is I'm really taking a look at row and column type template definitions. Looks a lot like Excel on the web, and we'll show you the exact same thing natively inside of Excel in just a moment. But this is kind of my first example of a driver-based operational planning form where I'm using operational metrics and drivers. So by individual product or service line, I'm entering unit sales forecasts, average selling price assumptions, assumptions associated with gross margin or contribution, and calculating down to come up with revenue, cost of sales, and gross profitability kind of assumptions. You notice that I'm entering in at the individual product line, but I also have the ability to aggregate in real time across total product or service line and total organizational entity hierarchy structures as well. So direct real-time feedback as I'm entering in information and aggregating that information in real time. The little scenario view at the top gives me my access to different particular perspectives. So right now I'm planning specifically for the international sales organization that I have access to. And based upon the fact that the white cells are enterable values, you'll notice that basically I am planning right now for the complete upcoming full year. So this is basically my annual operating plan, the full year budget that I'm putting in place. But we talked about the idea of data integration previously. So you'll notice that directly through the user interface, I can change my point of view or my perspective, right? I can change to different organizational units that I have secure access to plan for, or in the example we want to talk about here, I can take a look at actual numbers that are reported through in the application. So if I were to toggle over to actuals, you'll notice that they'll look a little different, right? Actuals are reported period to date, so in this case through the end of Q2, so through the end of June, right? And you'll also notice that they're non-modifiable read-only types of values, right? So actual numbers that have occurred from a plan perspective are locked protected values, but most importantly, they become the basis for my ongoing rolling forecast, right? So the forecast is just that. It's the hybrid or composite of actuals period to date with the ability to reforecast the remaining out period of the individual year, right? So this is that concept of continuous process rolling forecasts directly within the application environment. And I, as an end user, can now go in and make appropriate modifications or updates to the drivers right here within the application environment. So if, for example, I think that I have perhaps a capacity constraint that says, come September, I can only deliver 325 units of service. Notice when I make that change, it dynamically rolls that change up to not only the quarterly number, but all the way up to the year total number as well. But if I have certain numbers I want to target, for example, I think that due to a production scheduling capacity issue, that number in September is a value that I can't exceed, I would have the ability to go in and lock down that September number, but still go in and make a topside change and squeeze to a total production component. So maybe I'm thinking I can deliver 2,500 units total for the entire year. When I make that topside change, notice it will spread the change back across the lower level periods, leaving actual history alone and leaving my September lock value alone, and kind of give me a nice example of being able to do bottoms up and tops down planning directly within the same application environment. I commit those changes. It'll recalculate for me not only for that individual product line, but across all product and service lines and across all entity organizations. And basically in real time, I can go in and make those changes and modifications. Now, there are a couple other key things from just an audit and usability perspective that I think are important. Number one is that any data change within the PVCS environment is audited. So if I want to understand how I got to an individual number, that 325 units for September, for example, I have the ability to take a look at a change history that shows the value changes that have happened over time. So just a few moments ago, I went from 341 units to 325 units. So I can actually see the full change history rolled out across time for any data item within the planning and budgeting cloud environment. So if you get to those meetings where people argue about that's not my number, you have a nice, clean way to audit back through the whole history of change and how things have happened within the planning application. Now, the other thing that the concept of the cloud provides for me is the whole concept of scenario modeling, right? So you may have noticed up here at the top that when I was looking at the application, I was looking at this concept of a working version of the application. But the cloud planning environment supports multiple different versions as well. So I can produce not only a working, which I think of as kind of my most likely or most probable kind of current guidance or perspective from a forecast, but I can produce multiple different versions. So I can maintain an upside or a downside, a best case or a worst case, or I can provide the ability for end users in the field to do their own what-if modeling, right, which is basically to create a snapshot sandbox where an end user can go in and sort of pull the levers and change the numbers and sort of see what's involved in that. So notice that if I toggle over to that what-if application scenario or version, it's not very exciting. There's nothing there yet, right? But within the application are embedded what-if modeling tools that let me create that what-if snapshot, my end user sandbox on the fly, right? And now I can go in and modify those drivers kind of to my heart's content and see what the impact would be, right, the net change of those changes without impacting the consolidated corporate forecast. So if I were to go in and say, hey, that 2,500 is interesting, but what I really want to do is I want to take that number and I want to bump that up by 10%, for example, right? I can actually go in and make that 10% increase in change. That takes it from 2,500 to 2,750 units. Maybe to make that happen, I think I'm going to have to pull my average selling price down a bit. And while I'm at it, I may expect to see a little bit of perhaps gross margin decretion associated with that as well. So really, the numbers here don't matter so much as the concept, right? I'm changing operational drivers in a what-if scenario, and I can actually then see really the impact associated with that. So I can recalculate that individual product line, roll that down through the remainder of the application, and then very quickly see on a side-by-side basis the impact of that what-if model. So what I have here is my working version, the base case we were just looking at, the what-if model that we just changed, and what does that mean on a true gross profit contribution perspective. So if you look at this, this looks fairly favorable. If that's an operational scenario I can actually execute on, that particular scenario or model is probably one I would want to look at. You notice that this right now is weighted across the entire product and service line, but a simple expansion of product drills me all the way back down to the individual product lines, and I can see that the changes I made specifically for product X are the ones that are in aggregate rolled up to show me this different kind of gross profit contribution across all product and all service lines. So the key message there is pretty straightforward, right? Embedded what-if modeling and scenario components, embedded version control, and field data capture and field data collection, all using the cloud environment and all in a secure, safe, intuitive, easy-to-use kind of a form. Okay? So moving forward a little bit, we've been kind of showing some operational driver plans, but you may have a situation where simply going in and doing direct data entry, perhaps G&A type accounts rolled out across periods, replacing what is very frequently done in just distributed Excel spreadsheets right now, is part and parcel of the type of things we could deliver through the cloud as well. So in this particular scenario, you notice we're looking at prior year forecast, the current year budget we're preparing, and doing variances across those particular components. So if I were to expand into the total year for my budget, I can kind of drill down to either the quarters or ultimately all the way down to the months. And very much like we were showing you before, I can go in and make sort of topside changes. Perhaps I've got, you know, a $350,000 rent assumption that I'm wanting to make for the total year. Those changes will proportionally spread back to the lower particular values. Pretty straightforward stuff. The other thing you may have noticed is I have a few cells here that are highlighted in this kind of interesting shade of blue, right? That is a visual indicator that tells me that I have provided what we call supporting detail underneath those line items. So what does that mean? Well, you notice account 7640, my GL account for airfare, is the lowest level of my budgetary chart of accounts. But as an end user, the application provides the ability for me to go in and sub-itemize kind of below the line type details on how I arrived at that particular component. So you notice I would simply go ahead and take a look at the supporting detail for those cells. It will show me that this individual user for the international sales organization has chosen to basically itemize their own calculations that's based upon number of trips and cost per trip. A different user and a different cost center could choose to do this a different way, right? By trip, by employee, by named user, by destination, by whatever, right? So all of that kind of ability to capture the free form below the line type calculations are simply part and parcel, and they're available on any enterable cell within the planning and budgeting cloud service environment. Optional activity, but very, very nice for documenting the type of things that often people are doing in offline Excel spreadsheets or doing in kind of back of the back of the envelope or notepad type of things. It documents not only the numbers, but the intuition that went with how those numbers came together. Now, another thing I did want to point out is that often when you're kind of doing these bottoms-up type plans, we'll see situations where a customer or an end user is really trying to target the total number for the year. So for example, if you look at this, I have a group of accounts that roll up to my total office expenses, I have facility service expenses, I have T&E. They kind of give me a total OPEX number for the year. Right now, about $1.493 million. But if I, as an end user, had a certain goal or a certain target that I wanted to set, through the tools that are native within Planning and Budgeting Cloud Service, I can actually go in and set a topside target and spread that back to the lower level accounts without having to go back in and manually update 50 different accounts in 12 different monthly periods. How do I do that? Well, I simply pick the number I want to focus in on. I pick the ability to say I want to go in and spread a particular set of numbers or values, right? And this is where I can go in and set a particular number. Like right now, it's $1.493 million. Maybe I want to get to an even $1,500,000, right? So I can actually go in and make that change. And then I can specify how do I want to spread that down across the time periods and across the subordinate accounts. If I do it proportionally, it will simply spread it based on the existing data values, right? So if I simply go in and make that change, that's exactly the method I want to use. So I can say 1,500,000, make that particular change, and apply that particular change. And what it will do for me is take that change, push those changes back down to the lowest level of the account structure, and then when I simply save and reaggregate, I have now got that new total target number of $1.5 million in total operating expense set across the organization. So just a nice intuitive way to kind of mix bottoms-up and tops-down planning in a simple, easy-to-use fashion. Right now I'm doing this at a low-level cost center for international sales. I could just as easily do that for an entire region or entire division. Just a nice, easy way to kind of roll those numbers forward. Now, you'll recall we talked previously about the idea of planning in either the web environment or the mobile device, such as you're seeing here, or dynamically in Excel. So if I were to take a look at these same data forms inside of the Excel-based environment, you'll notice I actually have a Planning Cloud add-in that works inside of Excel that gives me access to the full application environment. So all those changes we just made a moment ago, the $1.5 million topside target, all the changes, the commentary, etc., even things like the supporting detail definitions, fully surface dynamically in real time in the world of Excel through SmartView. So I could go in and make changes right here in the application, say maybe I want to go to, $250,000 or $125,000, whatever it may happen to be, right? We'll go in and take a look at maybe changing the shipping number to $250,000. So when I make these particular changes, I am in real time submitting information from Excel into the Planning Cloud and the Planning and Budgeting Cloud Services environment. There you go. Got a little tongue-tied for just a moment, right? But the point here being, it's not updating a separate Excel spreadsheet. It's updating the cloud application repository in real time. So those changes we just made, the $250,000, the $125,000, and the $1.476 million total you'll see, will now manifest themselves directly right back in the web-based environment by simply reopening the form and seeing the actual change has been applied in real time. So again, any of those individual changes apply exactly as you would expect to see, right? And I have the ability to flow those individual numbers through, including things like the audit, the changes, and all the pieces that go with that. So the message there is simple, right? Consume information in the method that's most effective or important to your end users, be it via the web, via mobile devices like an iPad or a Surface tablet, or via Excel, right? Pick the mechanism that's most appropriate. You can mix and match by user. You don't have to go one route or the other, okay? Now, reporting is also part and parcel of the application. We showed a little bit earlier about some of the graphical dashboarding and dashboard options, but you'll notice I can also embed more formatted reporting type of options linearly in line directly within the planning application. So if I have, for example, a kind of a profitability report that I want to roll out by individual location, I can absolutely do that here within the application environment. So this gives me the ability to do embedded charting and graphing. Even these reports are interactive, right? So if I want to take a look at this specifically for that international sales organization where I was making the real-time changes a moment ago, I can toggle over and see specifically the international sales group, and I can start drilling into the components that make that up. So what are, for example, the revenue lines and how those are broken down? If I want to drill into additional information, you notice the reports give me the ability to link through in kind of a guided analytic view into other subordinate reporting views. So in this particular case, this kind of breaks those same numbers down on more of an actual versus plan basis and layers in on top of those percent of net sales as kind of an analytic view for looking at kind of where things logically make sense, right? So I have a situation here where you notice my OPEX numbers on a plan basis are actually significantly greater percent of sales than what we're seeing on an actual basis. So kind of a nice situation where it looks like I'm actually tracing on an OPEX basis at a lower percent of net sales, basically more efficient operations, the types of things you typically want to monitor within your application environment. And then finally, we've kind of given the ability to do more trending across the application that takes a look at, broken down by individual sales organizations, total profitability, and kind of how those are broken down on a revenue as a territory by territory basis. Again, just some sample reporting examples of how those may make sense to put in place. Now, the other thing from a reporting perspective that I think is very important to keep in mind is that Excel is not only a mechanism, as we were showing you before, for going in and doing data entry in the form basis, it is also a very effective mechanism for doing ad hoc reporting. So for those who may be familiar with working with SmartView for ad hoc reporting against some of the Hyperion applications previously, Hyperion Planning, Hyperion Financial Management, or SBase, it's exactly the same mechanism you can do to do ad hoc reporting directly against the Planning and Budgeting Cloud Service application. So if I want to understand more about a net income number for the total year, right now it's broken down by individual department, you'll see here. You notice I have the ability to, in real time, create my own ad hoc self-service reporting by simply double-clicking and drilling it down into the subordinate details. So you notice that income from operations consists of gross profit minus my operating expenses. Operating expenses, in this case, are on a before allocation basis. Kind of drill down through the whole hierarchical structure. So if I were responsible for putting together perhaps a gross profitability analysis by location, by product or service line, I can do that self-service as an end user right here in the world of Excel. So all I have to do is pick the accounts I want to focus in on, perhaps gross profit or my accounts. We'll keep just those in play. And now I can take a look at that across the different operational units. So if I simply drag and drop the entities from my filter onto my page, I can now drill in and take a look at that. This makes sense, right? Profitability comes out of sales organizations, so I probably want to keep just that in place. I can drill down through the sales organizations to the lowest levels of my overall cost center. And now I can kind of enrich that however I'd like to view, right? I can take a look at it across product and service line, for example. So maybe it makes more sense as I start getting into these multi-dimensional views to pivot the profitability accounts over into the columns and nest them that way. And then while I'm at it, I'll drag and drop the products and service into the rows. And very quickly I get to the situation where I can do an embedded and nested by product and service line, by sales territory and region, profitability by period, still with the ability to drill all the way down to low-level time periods, low-level products, whatever it may happen to be, live and in real time. So that whole kind of self-service ad hoc reporting, you lose none of those capabilities when you go with planning and budgeting in the cloud service. It's the same type of ad hoc responsibilities and capabilities that Hyperion users have known and loved for a long period of time. The final thing that I think we want to hit on from an overall planning perspective in the planning and budgeting cloud service operation is the idea of workflow and approvals. So you notice there's a whole concept of plan submission. So I have, as an end user, basically walked through my operating plan tasks, right, the 6 or 8 things I'm responsible for doing, including some things that we didn't really hit on, like capital planning or headcount and salary planning. Right? So I have the ability to do not just financial plans, but more operational plans as well, sales plans, marketing plans, production planning, headcount planning, whatever it may happen to be. But when I've kind of walked through my task, the final step is typically going in and submitting the plan up through the hierarchy of my organizational approval chain. So you notice here I have access to the particular organizational units, international sales where I am right now, and it shows me a very clean sequence of what's happened, right? The plan was originally released by the administrator. Carol Judd, who was the cost center owner, went in and made some changes to the plan, including some commentary that talks about expansion lines that were planned within the application. She has promoted now to Henry, the manager who I'm logged in as right now. And you notice that there is an entire approval hierarchy with conditional routing that basically says what is the routing of approval across the organizational unit. This is an optional function. You don't have to use this. But for distributed field data collection with approval hierarchies, conditional routings where perhaps a conditional approval is required based upon a threshold of revenue or a threshold of expense, all of those workflow promotion approval processes are just natively embedded directly within the planning and budgeting cloud service. So with that completed, I think we've walked through a lot of the highlights of what we were really planning to cover from a demonstration standpoint today. I think it's about 12:40, so we're right on time with where we wanted to be. One thing I did want to hit on, though, is that while the demonstration we've been showing so far is focused a bit on kind of a blend of operations, right, sales operations and finance from kind of the executive perspective and the bottoms-up kind of plan perspective, we also had the ability to plan and support within the planning and budgeting cloud service a myriad of different kind of non-financial application needs. So these particular screenshots we're showing here are a little different model, right? These are basically looking at sales and operational planning, broken down on a weekly product forecast basis, broken down by individual sales representative, individual product and product service line. So this is less what I would think of as an FP&A forecast and more of a field sales and field marketing type of a forecast. So I have looking at things like total product mix across my entire sales organization. I have a by sales organization or sales representative forecast that takes a look at weekly change on a week-over-week growth and percentage type of a basis. Again, on the right-hand side, kind of breaks down the details by individual product and service line and by representative. But as I roll down, you notice that I can actually take a look at individual opportunities, so by client, by product service line, kind of what's the forecasted number, what perhaps is an upside sales number, and probability to close. So there's statistical modeling that applies probability percents onto forecasts to come up with really a weighted probability sales pipeline. all this being delivered within the PBCS application environment. And from a management perspective then, your sales management organization has the ability to take a look at, for the current quarter, a week-over-week sales forecast, taking a look at patterns and trends, both from a sales rep basis, from a pipeline basis, what's in the pipeline, the number of transactions, the average deal size, et cetera, and how those kind of roll up from an overall organizational perspective. You know, when you aggregate those across regions, you have the ability to do more sort of top-down planning, where I can take a look at, for a total sales region, for Carol as a sales manager or Campbell as a sales manager, where right now my regional manager's bottoms-up forecast lines up with the target or the quota that was set from corporate on high. So I can do sort of multiple scenario analysis, looking at target versus working, taking a look at conversion rates over on the right-hand side, and down at the bottom, basically top 10 both customers and top 10 sales reps based on week-over-week changes. So kind of top and bottom analysis embedded directly within the Planning and Budgeting Cloud service. And then finally, all of this kind of rolls up from an executive dashboarding perspective. So this particular dashboard is actually built through SmartView. You know, so this is an Excel-based dashboard, but it gives me kind of the nice concept that I can use the best of things that Excel does, right? Visual analysis and all the things that go with that, without having to maintain separate Excel-based files with their own data components, et cetera. Just a nice, seamless way to integrate free-form Excel-based dashboarding and reporting within the data integrity that's provided within the SmartView application environment. So Craig, I think that was kind of the primary thing we were planning to cover from a demonstration standpoint today. I know that we have a few minutes to talk over kind of implementation next steps and perhaps field some questions and answers. So I will hand control back to you all.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So yeah,
we can kind of walk forward from there.
Scott, you did a great job. Thank you very much for that demo. Outstanding stuff. So Yasmin, flip us over to the next slide. Or I'll start singing, which is nobody wants that.
Oh, I'd love to hear that, Craig.
I'll call you after this, and I'll prove to you why you don't want to. So getting started with PVCS is one thing that we definitely know. There's a lot of options that you can use in the Planning and Budgeting Cloud services, so from dimensionality to forms to workflow, like Scott was just showing you a minute ago. So what we did is we've said, you know what, let's just take a way that is a acceptable bite of the apple related to what most planning applications are and can be to get you up and running quickly and allow you to see what the application is capable of doing. And so because of that, we've put together something we're calling PVCS Pro. So that gives you an accelerated deployment with a specific set of functionality that we use to get our clients up and running very quickly. So if you go to the next slide, Yasmin, this shows you kind of what you get. So there's a certain set of dimensions around account, entity, the things that you would normally see in one of these applications. And then we have a custom dimension. So if that's a product or project, whatever those happen to be, you can have a custom dimension in there as well in this package that we're talking about. The modeling that we're supporting also is P&L modeling. There's target setting, monthly plan and forecasting, obviously business rules, data forms that are associated, and they're custom to your business. So we come in, we take a look at what you need to do, and we develop something and get you up and running quickly. This isn't something that's directly out of the box. And if you go to the next slide, if you do have a need for some extended capabilities and extended needs, then we have the ability to add either, obviously if you want currencies, we would add that in. If you want cash flow, that would be an addition as well. So we have the ability to add on as you guys need, but what we thought we would try to do is to take a small bite, overall for an organization to get them up and running, but give them something very powerful from the capability and from the ROI standpoint. So based on that, if you guys have any questions around that, we'll go to Q&A next, but then the very end, we'll come back to what you need to do if we want to. If you're interested and you love the demo the way that we have, and you're excited about it, we can definitely come in and have a conversation about how to move forward and get you guys back up and running. So I think Q&A, there we go. Q&A is up next. And Yasmin, since we have a new web tool, I don't think I can see any questions that are out there. Can you see them?
Okay, I got some. Sending them to you.
Perfect. Yeah, can you go ahead and read it, Yasmin?
Okay, I have read there are currently 2 interfaces for PVCS. Can you explain both, and which one does Oracle see as the future?
Sure. So this is Scott. So what I demonstrated today is what we call the simplified interface. Basically, what it does is it really kind of streamlines the whole just interaction within the Planning and Budgeting Cloud Services application. You'll notice the layout looks very, very mobile and tablet friendly because it is. So this application with this interface is fairly browser agnostic. It works inside of Safari, inside of Chrome, inside of Firefox, any and all of those. So that is kind of the direction we are heading from a development standpoint with Planning and Budgeting Cloud Services, and really, truly with the on-premise Hyperion Planning applications as well. What I would call the traditional workspace-based user interface continues to be supported, but more and more, just because of the simplicity and the ease of use and the fact that it's so pervasive across all browsers. So you can now do planning on a Macintosh, right, using the simplified user interface. We're seeing that as kind of the direction going forward. So what we demonstrated today was that kind of next generation, what we call simplified user interface.
Okay, Craig, I sent more questions to you in chat.
So I do have a question coming through. What is a typical implementation plan to get up and running? Yeah, it depends on the overall requirements. The fast way is it's definitely a few weeks instead of a few months to get it up and running, and it depends on just the level of detail that you want in the plan and the number of scripts, calculations, forms, those types of things as well. But it is faster than the standard, using workforce planning or the on-prem application to get you up and running. It's one of those where if you let us talk to you, we can very quickly tell you how long we think it'll take. That's a good question. Also have another one. I'm a higher ed customer and wondering about implementations for higher ed institutions. So,
so this is Scott. I have Tom Solcher, who's my regional manager here. Tom may have a little bit more insight into that. I've done a tremendous amount with oil and gas customers. I haven't done a lot personally with higher education, but I think Tom may have some insight on that.
Yeah, actually, higher ed is one of the fastest growing segments within the PVCS application stack. Just in the last quarter or so, we've sold 12 or 13 different higher ed universities. So if you'll send your contact information to Craig, there'll be some contact on the end of this slide. I'll certainly get you some information and make sure that that our group that deals with higher ed can answer those questions more in depth.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate that. Hey, next up is any sample demo for the PBCS Oracle app that we can access. So does that mean access and play with, or access and see like additional functionality like Scott was showing you here? If it's you want to see another, like a demo that would run down a specific path, and we can totally set up a individual demo, come out and either talk to you directly or do something online like we did here. So you can see a demo that is specific in either an industry or a specific need that you might have in the company. So we can definitely do that.
The other thing, Craig, is actually there's a fair amount of information that's out there right now, not live software, but demonstrations on YouTube and on the oracle.com website. So if you go to oracle.com and search for PVCS tutorials or PVCS presentations, there's actually a whole library of kind of end-user YouTube-type videos and webcasts available. It's just part of the standard training for PBCS.
Perfect. Okay. I have another one that says, is it possible to use spreadsheet located on the client machine to connect to the client application?
Yes, and in fact, that's actually what I was doing today. So, that's an excellent point. I'm glad you brought that up. Sometimes when we talk about the cloud, we kind of lose track of what lives where. So while the data and the application definition are cloud hosted, the actual physical spreadsheet I'm interacting with is in a local version of Excel on my desktop. And that's really important because ultimately what I could have is I could have a multi-tab worksheet that I'm using to kind of calculate a series of numbers link those directly into the form that is represented inside that local instance of Excel and interact with that. So it's a nice bridge between what I think of as offline planning Excel templates and the cloud data repository and control. So the answer is yes. In fact, the standard method says that Excel continues to be a desktop tool, and it's simply connecting via an adapter out of Excel into the cloud application definition.
Another good question along those lines, how would we load ERP data into planning?
Okay, absolutely. So the Planning and Budgeting Cloud Service includes a full set of data integration tools that's purpose is specifically to do that. And ultimately what that set of tools provides is the ability for you to upload, map, and translate information in on the load. So example would be if I am perhaps planning at a higher level of, abstraction, so less detail on the budget side than perhaps I have in my general ledger, I can upload the GL trial balance in its native form and then do the consolidation and aggregation as I'm bringing information into the Planning and Budgeting Cloud Service. So for those who are familiar with Hyperion and the concept of Financial Data Quality Manager, FDMEE, basically an embedded version of FDMEE is included within the Planning and Budgeting Cloud Service to facilitate that integration with your ERP data or any other source of operational data you want to include. So that's no additional charge. It's simply part and parcel of the subscription is the data load, the data translation, and the data mapping tools.
Awesome. Another one kind of along those lines is, can I migrate on-premise to cloud or cloud to on-premise?
Yes, you can. And we're seeing a lot of customers do that. So on-premise planning applications are easily migratable, I guess that's a legitimate word, to PVCS. And the mechanism for doing that is you simply export the application definition using lifecycle management, the LCM tools that are provided right now on your on-premise planning application, upload the LCM package to the Planning and Budgeting Cloud Service, and import onto the PBCS side. So it's a very seamless transition from an existing on-premise planning application to a Planning and Budgeting Cloud Service application.
Awesome. We have several more questions. So what are your suggestions on how to share data currently in PBCS for BSO to ASO until the data push feature is released?
So currently, right now, you have the ability to provide inside of the Planning and Budgeting Cloud Service embedded ASO reporting cubes. So this sounds like a kind of a detailed reporting question. So currently, right now, you have the ability to define ASO reporting cubes and mapping those as basically a reporting application inside of planning. So the data push feature, what it will do is it will extend that same capability to be basically a real-time snapshot and real-time trickle feed from the block storage to aggregate storage mechanism. So right now, I mean, the method is kind of you have to set up the mapping and then at a point in time trigger effectively that reporting push. But when you have the data push feature coming up subsequently, it kind of makes that just one step more seamless. So right now, I haven't seen it as a big inhibitor, but it will just be a bit more seamless, I think, with a subsequent release.
Perfect. Okay, another is, does PBS support multiple plan types and XREFs among them? That's two questions.
Yeah, it's two questions, but the answer is yes to both. So multiple plan types are fully supported inside of PBCS. For those of you who are perhaps not familiar with kind of the architecture of Hyperion Planning, a plan type is simply like a different dimensional combination that you want to put together. So perhaps my full financials are by account and by entity, but my sales and margin plan, I break down and layer in product and service. Or my HR plan breaks down by employee type. Those kind of different dimensions represent different plan types. But yes, plan types are fully supported within those. And by specifying the source plan type for any data point, all of the XREF, XWrite capabilities in the back end are supported, and it does all of the dynamic movement across plan types. From an end user perspective, it's completely seamless, but that's exactly how it's supported.
All right. So Scott, next is LCM from on-prem to PVCS seamless, or does the LCM need to be adjusted to import to PVCS?
So if you're coming from on-prem into PBCS, the key is really kind of a version thing. If you are working with 11.123.500 or greater, so 11.123.500 or 11.124, the LCM packages come across seamlessly. I've had no issues personally in migrating those particular components. Prior versions, so anything prior to the .500 release of 11.123, there is a couple of header line informations you have to change in the XML file, so there's a little bit of manual interaction. But from a an LCM perspective, if you're on a fairly current version, it is a seamless upgrade and upload and import.
Perfect. Next is, how do we maintain security in PBCS and shared services?
Yep. So within PBCS is an embedded version of shared services. So while with the current release, it does not dynamically reach back into your Active Directory, basically it maintains its own snapshot. What you can do is you can upload and import your existing user profile and user security into the PBCS environment. And basically what PBCS maintains at that point is really a kind of, think of it as a replicated snapshot of your shared services. A future release is going to give us the ability to, provided your IT organization is comfortable with it, basically connect PBCS directly into your authentication engine, be it LDAP or Active Directory. But at the present time, it is basically an upload replication of your existing shared services infrastructure.
Perfect. Somebody's battery was running low, I just saw. Hey, I don't see anything else. Yasmin, did I miss anything?
Those are all the questions that we
Yeah.
got. We covered them.
So let's go to the last slide. We all saw a lot of exciting stuff today from the demo as well as the background on PBCS and why Oracle continues to be the market leader and is going to be putting in the R&D to make it move forward into the future as well. If you want to have that conversation that we talked about around how could we get something up running quickly to address the needs that we have on the planning side, we've got our number there in our email. So please let us know that. We'll be happy to reach out and have a conversation with you and answer any ongoing questions that you may have as well. So we'd love to make sure that you guys feel comfortable with the tool and know what it's capable of doing. So if there are no other questions, I don't think there are, then I think that's it. And we've got everybody done right on time and on budget, which is what we always do. So thank you guys very much. Have a great rest of the week, and we'll talk to you soon. That was a bad one.
Thanks, guys. See you next time.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.